Okay, let's begin. Ethel, would you please begin our journey as we journey together with Yaakov?
Morning. From Eretz Yisrael to Charan. We all live in several environments. Some of these, like our homes, our workplaces, and the social environments we create, are within our sphere of influence. They are small systems, and the contribution each person makes clearly affects them. On the other hand, there are also larger environments, our community, the country in which we live, the world at large, where our influence is not felt as strongly. On the contrary, these environments often force us to adjust. Parshat.
Yeah, actually, COVID taught us that one person can in fact affect the entire world, but that's most unusual. And certainly to the degree that we are seeing it and experiencing it, it's unprecedented. But it's true, we do have the effect. Not always do you see it, but in the case of COVID, we do. But usually it's an immediate environment that you can see that a person makes a change or an impact, not globally. Let's continue.
Parshat Vayeitzei focuses on the transition from one environment to another and the changes this brings about in a person's conduct. Vayeitzei means, and he went out, and the reading describes how Yaakov departed from Eretz Yisrael and went to Charan, an alien environment. The Hebrew word Charan is associated with anger, and thus our sages interpret this name as referring to the arousal of God's anger.
Right, so where's he going? He's going from Israel now. The footnote points out that the transition is even greater or brought into sharper relief when we consider where he was before he went to Charan. As Rashi told us in his final commentary of last week's Parsha, that Yaakov spent 14 years before he arrived in Charan, when he left Beersheva, still in Israel. He studied in the yeshiva, the academy of Shem and Eva, that's Noach's son and great-grandson, where he was devoted exclusively to spiritual matters. And there he's going to where? To Charan, which is an angry place. Not only is God angry at people's conduct, people are angry with each other over there, because that's the nature of the beast. If you're selfish, you're angry a lot of the time, because you always feel that you're being slighted and it's not fair, and why did he do it, and why did she do it? So being wrapped up in self is being, for the most part, to one degree or another, bregious with somebody or something. So Charan, which means anger, it means God's upset, angry as it were, with the conduct of the people, and the people were angry all the time. Not a very pretty place, but that pretty much sums up most of the world. And that's where Yaakov goes, from Israel, from the yeshiva. So let's see. Continue, please, Ethel.
There are three dimensions to Yaakov's stay in Charan. A, he was confronted by a personal challenge. In the company of Lavan and others like him, he had to struggle to maintain his virtue.
So the first point is just to maintain his own spiritual integrity was a challenge. In a place like Charan, the confrontations, the provocations that assaulted him continuously, most notably from his uncle, for whom he was working, Lavan. So just to maintain his own peace of mind, his serenity, his spirituality, that's number one achievement. Number two,
he built his family. During his stay in Charan, he married and fathered 12 of his 13 children. Despite the influences that prevailed in the community at large, Yaakov infused his family with the spiritual heritage received from Abraham, to keep the way of God and to implement righteousness and judgment. In doing so, he established the Jewish modus vivendi for all time. C.
Modus vivendi, I would imagine, means the way by which to live, yes?
Yes.
So B is, A was in his own integrity, and B was he builds a family. And he imparts the values of Avraham and Yitzchak, even in this hostile, challenging place. But his crowning achievement is C.
He elevated the environment of Charan, lifting up the godly sparks enclosed in that land's material substance. This was reflected by his acquisition of Lavan's sheep and the great wealth which he amassed.
So he leaves with a great wealth. The great wealth, of course, comes from Charan. What does he do with his great wealth? He serves God with it. So the third aspect is the impact on the environment. The first two were personal: A, self; B, family; C, environment. He transformed and elevates, in the words of the text, the divine sparks embedded deeply in Charan. Okay, read a little bit further, please, if you don't mind, Effa.
Extending the sphere of holiness. Each of these endeavors require unique spiritual powers. By overcoming the personal challenges posed by his surroundings, Yaakov showed the infinite power of the godly soul. Even a hostile environment cannot prevent its expression. By raising a family, he extended his circle of influence, enabling it to encompass others. Yaakov's acquisition of wealth and the refinement of the environment it symbolizes represents a far greater extension. The material possessions acquired by Yaakov were not by nature holy. On the contrary, without Yaakov's influence, Charan and all of its elements aroused God's anger. By elevating them, Yaakov was thus working to fulfill the purpose of creation, showing how even the lowest dimensions of existence can be transformed into a dwelling for God.
So what he's saying is that all of these three achievements really meant summoning ever deeper strength from his own soul. It's one thing to retain your own integrity. It's quite another achievement to be able to impart that to your children and to create an enclave of holiness, a sanctuary for God in your own home. And yet even a greater achievement is to transform and affect the environment. Please continue. Thank you.
Since Yaakov and his family shared an inherent connection to holiness, the fact that they were able to maintain this connection despite the challenges of a foreign environment, although a worthy attainment, cannot be considered an accomplishment of their own. The refinement Yaakov brought about in Charan, by contrast, was his own achievement, one which changed the nature of his environment.
What did it just say now? Again, so since Yaakov and his family share okay, he seems to be saying that the first two achievements are largely the legacy or the inheritance that Yaakov inherits from his father. They're able to maintain that. He's able to maintain that which is invested in him, and he imparts that to his children. But really what is happening is he's hanging on to, not losing that which was given to him. As a child of Yitzchak and a grandchild of Avraham, he continues that legacy. However, the third achievement is something greater. That's already not maintaining that which has been given to him, preserving it, sharing it with his family, but rather effecting a revolution in the world around him, and that's the greatest achievement.
In this manner, he set a pattern for his descendants, demonstrating how they would become God's partner in creation. They would journey throughout the world, uncovering the spiritual potential invested in the different elements of existence, revealing that everything that the Holy One, blessed be He, created in His world, He created solely for His glory.
So what the Rebbe is referring to here is as follows. On a simple, straightforward reading of the text's level, going into exile is a punishment. We don't deserve the Holy Temple. We don't deserve to live in Israel because we violated it and we sinned and we were banished and suffered in exile. It's a punishment. But as we have learned many, many times here, on a deeper level, it's all part of the divine plan. The Jews should fan out and be spread out throughout the world in order to achieve what Yaakov did in Charan, to go to these angry, dark places and access the divine spark deeply embedded there, the divine sparks, and elevate them. So what Yaakov did going to Charan is a portent and empowers us and bequeaths us with the ability to do so in whatever environment the Jew will find himself by divine plan. You're there not just to avoid being detected and hang low and survive and try and make a few dollars and live a comfortable life as you can. It's not the objective. The objective is to be a revolutionary and to bring godliness there by revealing the godliness that's deeply concealed there. Yaakov did that, and that he bequeaths to us. So it's not enough to retain our own piety in exile, not enough even to convey this to our children and create bastions and castles and fortresses of citadels of Torah, impregnable citadels of Torah, impervious to the outside world's influence. We missed the point there. The point in being in exile is to change the world. Yaakov did that. Okay, let's continue. Robert, our distinguished coordinator of the Mordechai Dov and Pesach Halevi Torah class. We thank you for your devotion and your making sure that this happens. I know Robert is traveling this week, and nonetheless is committed to getting the word out for next week, God willing. So Shikoyach, Robert.
For sure. Kindness, might, and beauty. These efforts distinguish the divine service of Yaakov from that of his forebears, Avraham and Yitzhak. Our rabbis have identified Abraham's service with the attribute of kindness, chesed, Yitzhak's with might, gevura, and Yaakov's with beauty, tifereth.
All right, now he's going to explain. Yeah, it goes without saying, we're all aware of this, that these three attributes, chesed, kindness, gevura, severity, restraint, or might, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, beauty, harmony, tiferes. So you know that these three attributes are the three primary divine attributes that God has chosen to manifest. There are 7 in total, from Chesed down to Malchus, but the primary ones are the first 3. So what are the difference between them? Now he's going to explain. Chesed, continue please, Robert.
We know what Avraham did, spreading the word. We know that
he's going to explain.
Yitzhak dug wells. What did Yaakov do?
He's going to explain now.
Okay. Chesed reflects a thrust outward. The person gives generously without considering whether the recipients are worthy or not. Thus, Avraham showered kindness on people who bowed down to the dust on their feet.
He's referring to the fact that when he invited the angels into his home, thinking that they were just travelers, the local travelers, he makes them, the Torah says, wash their feet before they enter his tent. And the question is, why does the Torah point out such trivial a detail? Entirely irrelevant to the story. He invites them in. He probably said many things. They did many things. Why point this out? So it actually explains. Because these were people that worshipped, imagine, the dust on their feet, whatever that means. But it's obviously indicative of a very degenerate and very low kind of spirituality. I mean, they believed in something. They worshipped.
Well, they worship nature, right? They worship the earth, so they worship nature.
Yeah. But it's true. The idea is you're right. Earth, nature, but on their feet. They could have just worshipped earth, but it's the earth on their feet, something very lowly. Yeah, it's not foolish. I mean, it's as you're saying, it's worshiping nature. So that's why he makes them wash their their feet because he doesn't want to bring this into his home. But that's the kind of person that Avram is, extending kindness and seeking to inspire and reach the lowest levels of spirituality. Continue. This is chesed, pure chesed. But continue.
But the fact that this generosity is given indiscriminately allows for the possibility that it will not change the inner nature of the recipients.
Everybody received this. So there was no challenge. You just show up and you got his kindness.
For this reason, although Abraham lived among the Canaanites for decades and they recognized him as a prince of God, they did not alter their conduct.
Now this is, we see this. Where do we see this? The Torah says that both Avram and Sarah had made souls. That's expression. They made souls. Meaning to say, they inspired people to believe in monotheism in God and be in touch with their souls. And our sages say this was in huge numbers, in the tens of thousands. The question is, what happened to these people? We don't find any continuum. The answer is, when Avram died, they all slowly but surely reverted back to the old ways because there was no real inner change. They were basking, inspired by him, his generosity and his chesed, his kindness, physical and spiritual. So in his orbit, you were caught up with it, and you believed and you were good. But when he left, it's like a teacher in a classroom. Now, some teachers in a classroom, they're successful by dint of their personality, their charisma, whatever it is. But when the teacher leaves the classroom, all mayhem breaks out immediately. Remember, this is a kid, because teacher's gone, so that's it. So Avram didn't affect the change from within. It was a change that came from without, which is necessary as stage one, which then must lead to stage two. Continue Gevura. This is Yitzchak.
It's interesting that he didn't inspire any, let's say, disciples, any people that like, I'm teaching, but now you go out and teach. He just did it himself, and
it ended there.
It ended there.
It's only Yitzchak now that continues now where Avram left.
Right.
Where Avram left off. Continue now. Exactly.
Gevura is directed inward. As our sages commented, who is a mighty man? One who conquers his natural inclination.
This is just, it's very telling and counterintuitive almost, because when you say who is mighty, we usually speak about expression, power, control of others. But who is mighty? One who contains himself. True might is inward. That's true Gevura. Eizeh Gibur, who is the mighty one who conquers his natural inclination. This is from Pirkei Avot. So this is Yitzchak. This is an inward change. Continued inner directed activity.
Inner directed activity produces change, but that change is primarily within oneself. Although this inner light also radiates outward and inspires others, in the final analysis, each person must elevate himself, and thus Gevura will not affect those resistant to change. Therefore, Yitzhak lived only in the Holy Land. He could not relate to life outside the realm of holiness. Even in Eretz Yisrael, he had contact with far fewer people than did his father.
So Yitzchak is about demand. He was a sacrifice. He was a sacrifice, ready to be offered to God. Now he lived his whole life that way. That's highly demanding, and it's not a thing that you will naturally imitate. Avram, yes, it's about giving and love and kindness, and that's easy to be a part of. It's not easy to be part of Yitzchak's world. You've got to be ready for it. And so therefore, he doesn't travel around. He stays in Israel. It's not a lot of people are drawn to this or inspired by it because it isn't what you get, it's what you give. And giving is not easy. Continue.
But he did give. I mean, he dug wells, right? So he did.
So the digging of the wells is all symbolic of you have to do the digging to discover the well of living water in the depth of your own soul. He set a profound example, but it didn't naturally draw you in. It's a decision you got to make that, okay, I'm ready to invest. I'm ready to emulate this and dig my own well too.
In Kabbalistic texts, it is explained that Yaakov's attribute, Tiferes, beauty, comes from a fusion of chesed and gevura.
So this is amazing. He has the best of both. Influence and demand and inner change. Continue.
For neither a single motive nor its opposite is beautiful.
What makes something beautiful is not one color, one note, one shape. The whole point of beauty is where different shapes, colors or musical notes or whatever come together in harmony. That creates beauty. A beautiful idea even is an idea that resolves many problems, not just one answer to one question. The true beauty is when you have a whole lot of problems and the one idea unites all the problems and resolves them. That's truly beautiful. So beauty comes, continue.
Beauty comes from the fusing of different and even opposite tendencies. This reflects the influence of the Ein Sof, an infinite quality.
So it's only God, ultimately the true infinite can confuse opposites and make them harmonious, because the infinite transcends the limitations of both. It's a very deep place. So let's continue. This is what Yaakov is. Similarly,
Yaakov is identified with the quality of truth. For truth has a dimension that transcends mortal limits, being above all possibility of change or interruption. With truth, one can reach out and change environments, for nothing can oppose truth. Thus, Yaakov is described as receiving a heritage that has no boundaries and is given the blessing. And you shall spread out eastward, westward, northward, and southward. For as evidenced by his journey to Charan and later to Egypt, he was able to elevate even foreign settings.
So what is he saying? It's rather cryptic. He's saying that Yaakov, which is the fusion of Avram and Yitzchak, what's the net result? His influence, and it is influence, so that's chesed, however, is such that he will inspire. It will reach everyone. Yitzchak didn't, Avram did. Avram reached everyone because why not? Free meal, love, and attention. Who doesn't want that? Yitzchak's sphere of influence was extremely narrow because it's all about sacrifice, fire. You recall we spoke in earlier classes that Yitzchak, rather Avram, the physical incarnate of Avram of Chesed is water, which comes down, it flows downwards. The nature of water is when things are wet, they merge together, they coalesce. It's all Chesed, touching, coming together. Yitzchak is the sacrifice, the consummate korban. He's fire. Fire goes up, not down. Fire is created by the consumption of the fuel, sacrifice. Fire exposes things. It doesn't meld things together. Everything's exposed, separate. It divides. You're on your own. You're judged on your own. You're not riding on somebody else's goodness. It's got to be your efforts. It's the opposite of Yitzchak. And therefore his influence at the end of the day, how many people did he touch? Handful. If that, now we're saying something most extraordinary. We need to understand this. Yaakov both. Does it mean Yaakov both? Like Avram, everybody, water. Like Yitzchak, fire. How is this possible? The answer is, as we just read, he's neither chesed nor gevura. Emes, truth. Truth. Truth is beyond chesed and gevura. Let's explain this. Let's understand this a little bit. Chesed and gevura, these emotions, you're a giving person or you're a demanding person. You're a loving person or you're a warrior. These are different natures people are born with, to one degree or another. Some are fighters and some people are peace-loving. That's your nature. That's your nature. We're talking about an attribute of chesed and gevura. We're talking about your emotional makeup, your psyche, your personality. Truth isn't about you. Truth is objective. Truth is. Torah is truth. Yaakov embodies Torah. Torah describes him as the wholesome man, dweller of tents. We mentioned earlier the 14 years he was in yeshiva. Truth, friends. If we embody truth, it isn't about agenda, loving. It isn't about me at all. The truth inspires everyone because it's true. Sooner or later, it will touch everyone because it's the emes. And so that's the chesed, that's the Avram property. It's boundless. But unlike Avram, it touches everyone because he's so benevolent, so everybody wants to be on the receiving end. Like Yitzchak, it touches everyone that they want to sacrifice for it. They're ready to sacrifice because it's the emes. This is a whole new level. This is a whole new level of influence. Not because you're a nice guy, or that's Avram, or not because you're the demanding guy that's Yitzchak, which most people not interested in, but because you're truthful. If you're emes, then you inspire real change. Why? Because it isn't about you. It isn't about your agenda. It isn't about your personality. It's about the objective truth. About Hashem, Torah, which reveals the objective truth of God. At the end of the day, best of both worlds, it's going to touch everyone and it's going to inspire real change. So the shliach knows that if he's not having an influence, the truth is, I should rephrase that, or put it positively. He has to affect everybody wherever he is. And what's required is emes. And emes is humility. Because truth, without humility, one can never discover or connect to truth. Because the ego is in the way. And there's always going to be a slant, a corruption of the truth. If we approach it with an ego, what's in it for me? You'll never see what it really is. And you won't embody it. But if your ego, it's not ego, it's about the emes, and your ego is not in the way, and what you're exuding is the truth of Yiddishkeit, that's irresistibly attractive, because everybody wants the truth, whether they know it or not. Why? Because it's the truth. And what is the truth? Hashem. And everybody wants a connection to Hashem, because that's where we come from, and that's the emes. So therefore, let me try and get to that before they give up. So therefore, Yaakov, we just wanted the quotes over here. His heritage has no boundaries, meaning to say his influence is universal. And he's the one that's told the Faratzta Yomba Vakedba V'Tzafayim V'Negba, which is, by the way, the slogan of Chabad. This verse that Hashem promised Yaakov, and you would spread eastward, westward, northward, and southward. That's the motive of Chabad, to spread Yiddishkeit and touch every Jew everywhere and inspire the whole world. So what it has to be, it's Yaakov. Now, to be sure, Yaakov only comes as a result of Avraham and Yitzchak. So those elements are not done with. We move on now to Yaakov, the concurrent. There is the element of love, and there has to be the element of demand and so on. But then the foundation, the ultimate, the pinnacle is Yaakov. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Okay, Jacob, the deeds of the patriarchs, please read for.
The deeds of the patriarchs are signs for their descendants. See Rambam, commentary to Genesis, chapter 12, verse 6, or a Torah beginning in Parshat Lech Lecha.
You don't have to read the footnotes. Was that in the text? It's in the text, in brackets.
No, the thing I just read is the title.
That's funny. It's a footnote.
Ramban.
Okay.
Ramban, not Ramban.
It's what?
Ramban, not Ramban.
Ramban. My apologies.
Yeah,
Correct.
but it's a footnote. It's a
Okay.
source.
No,
I don't know
no,
why
it's the title. It's the title of the next whole piece.
it's a mistake. And I'm telling you, it's a footnote.
Oh, okay.
It's the source of that statement. This statement, the deeds of the patriarchs are signs for their descendants. The source is the Ramban. But somehow in your text, it got in the primary text. There should be a footnote. Okay, continue.
Yaakov's journey to Charan serves as an analogy for the descent of our souls into our bodies. In the spiritual realm, our souls experience direct revelations of godliness. Nevertheless, they go out from that realm and descend into bodies to live in this material world. Following the pattern set by our patriarch Yaakov, every soul confronts the challenge of physical existence. As a person matures, he establishes a family, creating an environment in which his values are expressed. Similarly, through contact with the world at large, he refines and elevates the godly life force invested in creation.
He's saying that each one of us have to go through the 3 stages of Avraham, Yitzchak, and then Yaakov. Avraham is love, kindness. That's how our life has to begin. We have to be the recipients, hopefully we are, of a loving, nurturing environment. That's Avraham. Then as we get older, bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, now comes Yitzchak. You've got to invest yourself, effort, not on the receiving end. Now you've got to contribute, and it's discipline, and it's fire. And then the crowning achievement is when we go out there in the world, Yaakov, and transform it. Okay, continue.
This pattern is also reflected in the exiles of the Jewish people at large, where people have been forced to leave the holiness of Eretz Yisrael and journey among the nations. Throughout the centuries, despite the challenges presented by the societies in which we dwelt, we have held true to our spiritual heritage, have maintained a tradition of family life, and have elevated the material substance of the world, showing how it is God's dwelling.
So he's saying that's the Jewish people have done. We were like Yaakov, left Israel, we went into exile, and overall, we have maintained our spiritual integrity. We have brought up generations, and we have changed the world. We have changed the world. I often talk about that book. I think recently I did, The Gift of the Jews by Thomas Cahill, a historian and former writer for the New York Times, who makes the point in this very entertaining book that every value the Western world holds dear is Jewish and comes from Avraham, from the Torah. So we have changed the world. The whole Western democracy, not just the United States, but all democratic nations, the value of human life, that all life is equally sacred. This is a uniquely Jewish idea. It was a crazy idea when Avraham first started to espouse it. Lives aren't equal. It's a jungle. The law of life is, as Darwin preached, it's survival of the fittest, and the stronger devours the weaker. And the human being is no different in this chain of nature. And Avram said, no, Mr. Darwin, you're wrong. That a soul, every human being is made in the image of God, and we are different. Of course, we're different. But one isn't superior to the other, and one is not to be devoured by the other. But that each human being has the unique contribution. This is the foundation of the Western world, the whole world already to a large degree. It's embarrassing for any country in the world to admit that in their society, there is slavery and there are those that are subjected to others. It still goes on, but they won't admit that it does. That's a big step already. At least you portray that you respect human rights. But the whole idea of human rights, just to cite one fundamental example, is uniquely Jewish. So I've had the tremendous influence, as well as many other ideas related to this, and movements to fix and perfect the world. So we've done the Yaakov thing. We're doing the Yaakov thing, and it's almost over. The mission is virtually complete. Continue, Jacob. Exile is only temporary.
There's a series of lectures by Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, who describes how Torah, in many, many ways, influenced the Declaration of Independence for the United States completely, and every person who signed that declaration. It's a very interesting series of lectures.
Yeah. I mean, the opening words of the Declaration of Independence, it's all are made in the image of God, and so on. It's right out of the Torah, 100%. And of course, America, United States, the superpower, the greatest influence of any country in the world. Yep. Okay, good. Continue. Final chapter, Jacob. Conclude. On the way to Charan.
Exile is only temporary. On the way to Charan. Pardon?
Yeah.
Exile is only temporary.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. On the way to Charan, Yaakov experienced a vision of God in which God promised him, I will return you to this soil. This indicates that Yaakov's mission to go to Charan and the mission of the Jewish people at large to make the world a dwelling for God are not ends in themselves. Yaakov was not intended to stay in Charan forever, and our exile too will come to an end. For every Jew's true place is in Eretz Yisrael.
And we must add that when Mashiach comes, the whole world becomes Eretz Yisrael. So it doesn't mean, as one might mistakenly infer from this paragraph, that we leave Charan, goodbye, done with you. No, Charan is transformed and becomes Israel. The whole world becomes God's home. Continue.
This is no longer a dream, but a reality that is becoming manifest. To borrow an expression from the previous Rebbe, there is nothing left to do. The coat is already sewn. We have even polished the buttons.
What is referring to is the imagery of a victory parade. The soldiers, all of us are the soldiers. Some of us in the trenches, some of us in the officers' hall, planning, generals, but each one we're all part of the battle. And then there's the victory parade. So the soldiers have to get dressed and polish their buttons. That's the final step, is polishing even the buttons. So says the previous Rebbe, that's what we're holding. We've even polished the buttons. So conclude, therefore.
We are on the threshold of the redemption and indeed are crossing that threshold. Soon Mashiach will lead every Jew out of exile and back to our Holy Land.
Amen. So this morning, thank you to our readers and all of you that attended in honor of Michael. So may I make a suggestion? So this class was inspired by, more than inspired, he demanded it from me, by Michael, who was devoted to it and created it. So friends, I want to ask you a favor on behalf of Michael and for you and for Hashem and for all Klal Yisrael. Make it a mission. Give thought to this and to invite other people to join this class. Right? In the course of the week, the weeks to come, the time to come, we all meet people. They should be uppermost. You know, there's a Sunday morning class. It's at 10:15. It's not too early, and it's in English. We read from a text. And if you're enjoying it, and if you feel that it's worthwhile, and I hope you do, because it's Torah and Chassidus, and it's from Michael's neshama, please spread it. And every person that you bring is additional nachas to him. I think this will be a wonderful resolution to undertake and to carry out. Especially is when the month of Kislev, which is a Hasidic month, It's all about illuminating the world, bringing the light of Torah to the furthest reaches, as in Hanukkah, lighting up the world, the outside. Okay, friends, so give it some thought. Who do you know? A friend, could be someone in the house you're living with. Could be a neighbor, a business acquaintance, whatever. You tell them this is Sunday morning class. Let me add your name. You can give the name, email directly to Robert or to me, and we'll add them to the list. And there's no obligation on their behalf. The name is there, and God willing, they will show up. What do you think? Good idea? Yeah, be a nachas for Michael.
We'll try.
Thank you. Yagaita matzasa, our sages say, if you try, you will be successful. You'll find.
Amen.
So have a wonderful week, everybody, and see you all, God willing, next week, if not sooner. Thanks for joining.
You too, Rabbi. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.